Just as a reminder, this is being recorded. I would very much appreciate if all of you would make sure that you remain muted unless you have a question. I'm Nancy, and I am delighted to introduce a dear friend and a simply amazing foster parent, Lisa DeAnnabelle. She has fostered over 200 animals. And I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, and she's going to talk a little bit about her experiences and tell us what it takes to be a great foster home, because she has provided great foster homes. It's all yours, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro, Nancy. And yeah, I'm a little nervous, but that's okay. I'll just start talking. So yes, my name is Lisa DeAnnabelle, and I've been fostering since 2001, for 22 years. And I have fostered for a variety of different groups in the area. But primarily, I'm going to say probably 90% of my fosters are through the Tompkins County SPCA. And I did put together a PowerPoint presentation with lots of pictures of cute dogs. So let me get that started. And can everybody see that?
Give it a second. There we go.
Okay. So the first thing, or the most common comment I get from people when they hear that I do foster care is their remark is, I could never foster. I won't be able to give them up. And that truly is a concern, because over the 22 years I've been fostering, I have been a foster failure, and that is the term that is used 10 times. So I have foster failed with 5 dogs, and this actually was my very first foster puppy. He came into my life in November of 2001. The executive director at the shelter at the time was putting out pleas for people to step up and bring animals home. The Tompkins County SPCA had just declared themselves as the first no-kill open admission shelter in the country. And they only had the one small building, so they were eager to get animals that there was no room for out into foster homes. So when he put out this request for someone to step up to take care of a skinny puppy that came in as a stray, I thought I could take care of a skinny puppy for a couple of weeks. So I went and I picked him up, and 3 weeks later, he never went back, and he was mine. And that's my Louie. 2 years later, Sophie came into the shelter after the holidays. A student brought her in saying she didn't know what to do with her. Her roommate was allergic, so she was an 8-week-old pug, and I brought her home to foster, and she never left. And a couple of years later, I got one of my first medical fosters. My little Chloe was found on a Thanksgiving day on someone's lawn with the most horrific case of demodectic mange. And it took her actually 2 years to recover. It was a very, very long, tedious process of finding out what was going to work to help her heal. And of course, after 2 years, where's she going to go? Nowhere. So that was my Chloe. And then this was my Sonny boy, came from an out-of-county hoarding situation where they seized somewhere about 160 dogs. And 5 of them came to Tompkins County, and 3 of them actually ended up in my home to care for, completely afraid and shut down of the world. It actually took over a year for him to even be touched. He pretty much lived in my bathroom. His safe space was behind the toilet, but eventually he, given the time and space he needed, he came around and stayed with us. And then my last dog foster failure was my Ellie, and some of you may know Ellie. She came up from Mississippi with, she was a stray, found with a broken hip. They did surgery for her down there, which never healed. So when she came up to the north, she needed surgery. So I took her in as a medical foster, and she stayed as well. So it's not all about the dogs. So I do have some foster cats as well. that stayed. So this was my Cindy Lou who came with a broken leg, and she was just the sweetest cat ever. These guys were my first bottle feeder kittens, and they came as 2 weeks old, and they stayed. Buddha is still with me today. This is my otter. She's 6 years old now. She actually came in as a 2-day-old stray. So I've had her since she was actually 2 days old. And then my last foster fail, or I should say my most current one, is my little June bug, who came to us in June. This past June. She is now 7 months old. She was 2 weeks old, and she was a bottle feeder. So yeah, we've got her now as well. So I do have another dog that I adopted from Oswego, and that's my little pug Rocky, who some of you may know as well. He was not a foster. So as Nancy said, 22 years of fostering. I have had over 200 animals that have come through our doors. So I think that, just keeping 10 isn't so bad of a record. The past year, 2022, I've had 9 foster dogs and 1 foster kitten come stay with us. So there's Jelly Bean and Fluffernutter. They came up from the south. Typically, when the transports come from the southern states, the puppies come in, they get a medical check, and they are immediately sent out to foster care for a week or two, usually 2 weeks. They have no vaccinations until they actually get to our shelter, so they need to be kept in a safe, clean environment, make sure that their vaccinations take hold, and also to make sure that they don't actually come down, that they're not, that they're not sick too. So sometimes they actually may have kennel cough, and I've been very lucky. They've never had anything worse than that. So we usually keep them for about 2 weeks, and then they'll go back to the shelter and go up for adoption. After they left, these 3 little guys came, I should say girls. They were from a local home that was overcrowded with dogs, and they were found in a small plastic kennel cab, all 3 of them together, completely under-socialized. And I'll show you some additional pictures later of them, but they just blossomed and got adopted into great homes. This is my little Gravy, and he was a medical foster this year. And then this little girl came into our life. She stayed with us for a couple of weeks. She was an owner surrender. The people who had her said that she was too much for them to handle. And she was just gorgeous and lovely and didn't have a problem finding her home. This was my June bug. And then these guys were here over Christmas. So they also came up from the south. This is Mistletoe and Holly, and they found great homes as well. And now 2023, 2023, I should say, this is my first foster of the year, and this is Tess. And she's still with me. She's in the other room right now sleeping. And yeah, so that's our current fosters.
Lisa,
So,
how many animals are coming up from the south, sort of percentage wise?
well, they used to do it more often, but since COVID, they've kind of cut back a little bit. But every couple of months, I'd say every 3 or 4 months, they bring up a transport. And there's a whole network of shelters down in the south that that have connections with northern shelters. And either they fly the dogs up or they're driven. So it's quite a long, grueling process for them to come. So I'd say every three or 4 months, and it's usually anywhere from 5 to 10 will come at a time. And they do bring, like I say, the majority are puppies, but there's quite a few. I'd say at least 5 or 6 puppies come up with each transport. Fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know, but locally, there really aren't that many foster puppies that come to the shelter from local sources. This year has been a little bit different. There was, before Christmas, there was an owner surrender that had 11 puppies from 1 litter. Yeah, there's actually, most of them have been adopted. There are still 2 available at the shelter now, little shepherd mixes. And then at the same time, these 5 puppies, Mistletoe and Holly, had 3 other siblings. So there was those 5 puppies. And I just actually got an email about a litter of, I think they said 4 or 5 7-week-old purebred Malamute puppies that are going to be available soon that are coming in, and they're looking for fosters for them.
Wow.
So they, it's busy. It's busy. So as a foster parent, you are responsible for providing a clean and safe, comfortable indoor. It's a temporary home. You have to, provide. You have to feed them. The food actually is provided by the rescue group. Any of the rescue groups that I've fostered for provides food and medical care if needed. So, fresh water, exercise, if there's any medical or behavioral protocol, you agree to follow whatever is prescribed by the rescue staff. And the other thing, which sometimes can be difficult, is to arrange to transport the animal for checkups. If they do have medical appointments, to make sure that you can get them. They're really good and flexible, but it's still something that needs to be just considered. And then when it's time for them to go up for adoption, you do have to bring them back. So the reasons for that animals would go into foster care, that the primary one is that they're too young to go up for adoption. So all animals need to be a minimum of 8 weeks. They need to be 2 pounds and they need to be healthy. And they break this down into 3 groups as well. There's 3 subgroups. So you have the neonatal puppies and kittens that do not have a mother. So these are our bottle feeders or bottle babies. So like my little otter came in, and this actually is one of the greatest needs, because they get dozens and dozens and dozens of bottle baby kittens that come in during kitten season, which is primarily from March, April, and it's actually been extended to almost October.
Wow.
There's it goes through June, and then there's usually a break in the summer, and then in the fall there's another batch that come through. But not only do we get a lot of kittens, but occasionally we'll get bottle baby orphan puppies. And I actually had the honor and privilege of taking care of a litter of 6 4-day-old puppies that someone had brought their female dog with their litter to the emergency room, and unfortunately the mom didn't make it. So they called up the shelter and said, we need someone to be able to take them. They need to eat and be cared for. And if they couldn't find someone to take them immediately, then they were going to euthanize them. So I happened to have been sitting at the desk when the call came in, so they ended up in my bedroom. And it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. And yes, it's difficult for the first couple of weeks because the puppies and kittens need to be fed every few hours. And with 6 of them, it's round the clock. So it's, feed them, put them down. And my Louie, my big black lab Great Dane mix, was absolutely amazing with the fosters, because he would sit right by me. I'd feed the puppies, I'd hand them to him, and he would lick them and clean them and take care of them. Puppies and kittens at that age, when they're that young, 2 important things are they cannot regulate their own body temperature. So they rely on their caretakers to keep them warm, clean, and dry. And they also cannot relieve themselves without some type of stimulation. So in order to keep, everything flowing, you have to actually stimulate them to relieve themselves. And the other thing is you have to make sure that you check their weight daily. Puppies and kittens, if they're not gaining weight regularly, or if they start to lose weight, then that's the first indication that something isn't right and there could be a medical issue that's going on. But besides that, once you get through, the first week or 2, you can sleep through the night, and, they still might be bottle feeding, but they can start going for longer times without needing to be fed. So then we have neonatal puppies and kittens that have their mother. And I've never been able to take in fosters like this. My house just isn't set up for it. I have too many of my own animals. the moms and their babies need to have a quiet, clean place to raise their family. This, however, is probably one of the easiest fosters because the moms do all the work. They're doing the feeding, they're doing the cleaning. All you have to do is take care of the moms and make sure that they get proper nutrition and that their bedding is cleaned and taken care of. And usually when the puppies and kittens are weaned about 4 to 5 weeks, then they will split them up. Usually they try and send them out in groups of two or three, and to other foster homes. And then the parents will go back to the shelter and they will get spayed and, be put up for adoption themselves to look for their homes. And then the third group, and this is the most common need for foster care, are the weaned puppies and kittens. So with this, we're talking about puppies and kittens, and again, I'm just going to focus on the puppies right now, is anywhere from like 5 weeks to about 5 months. And these are just some of the little guys that came through my house. These three that are in the little pink basket were a litter of 7 puppies that came in. It was an oops litter. And I took 3 of them here, and these actually are 2 of them, a little bit older. Some of these guys did come up from the south. She did with her brother. He actually was a stray here in Ithaca. These 2 little guys we saw earlier, that's Fluffernutter and Jellybean. They had come up from the south. And yeah, so the length of stay that you would keep the puppies for can be anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months.
One of the things that always strikes me about the dogs that you foster is that they're really incredibly social and well behaved.
Well, they don't always start that way.
They don't start that way, Lisa, and I wanted to bring that up because when they leave your home, or when they're about to leave your home, they are really incredibly happy, confident dogs. The majority of them, all the ones that I have met.
It does. It definitely takes time, and that brings me into enrichment, and that, what I was reading before about, what it takes to be a foster parent, that's basically the bare bones, that's the minimum.
Yep.
But if you really want to, build confident dogs, I mean, think about all of you, how, have raised your own dogs and what you do with them if you've had them from puppies. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take that much time. I mean, with these 3 puppies, this was actually Captain America, Loki, and Thor. So they named this whole litter after Avengers. And, each day they'd grow a little bit, they'd explore a little bit, and each day was like, okay, so let's explore crinkly things today, and let's explore rolling things today. And this was, we're going to have boxes, and I just took cardboard boxes and threw them out on the floor and let them explore. So it's about making sure that they feel safe and secure and happy. I do have some equipment that I use. This was them exploring the wobble board. And this wasn't the first time. The first time that I had them out on it, I brought them out one at a time so that they didn't bounce around too much. But it was kind of fun to watch them all together. I'm very lucky that I have a very large fenced-in yard. When I have very, very young puppies, I do make put up fencing so that it's smaller. And I do have some equipment that's out there for them to explore. So I have an A-frame, and but with the young ones, I typically put it down so it's almost on the ground, so that they can explore the texture, they can explore the sloping, they can explore the climbing without worrying about getting hurt. I have a very small dog walk that they like to play on. That's actually Rocky playing with one of the fosters. And I have a couple agility tunnels. And it's really interesting with the agility tunnels to watch the shy dogs primarily come out and explore it, and then my dogs will come out and they'll start racing through it, and sure enough, you see them, build up their confidence and then want to run through it as well. But this little guy, this was Bodie. I just threw out a bunch of toys, and it's interesting to see because the wobbler that's here, he completely ignored it, and he had puppy zoomies. I love watching him play. But at one point, you'll notice he kind of bumps into it accidentally, and he's like, "Oh, food!" And he stops and he eats, and then he goes back to shaking his squeaky toys. So the other thing I wanted to mention about my dogs and my cats is that when especially the puppies, but even the adult dogs that come to stay with us, I do not let them interact the first day, especially. And depending on the situation, it's usually 2 or 3 days until the new fosters get a chance to settle in a little bit. They get to know me, they get to know the house, if they're comfortable with the yard. And like Rocky and Ellie will walk by the crate that they're in or the pen that they're in multiple times through the day, so that they get to experience and smell each other, but they don't really interact until everyone's comfortable. And depending on how long they're here with us, they can be pretty active. So this picture up on the top, this is Tess. This is my foster who I have right now. And when she comes in from playing, usually at lunchtime, I'll give her lunch on a licky mat. That helps her settle down. They had some concerns about her, saying that she was really overly nippy and bitey. And so we're working on some training and some settling exercises. And it's not to say that, and I'll talk more about this with behavior dogs, that they're going to be, cured or completely rehabilitated. But the goal is to get an idea of how these animals are in a home. And if there are any concerns, how we can manage them better so that we can find the appropriate home and give them clues from the get-go as to what's going to assist them in a successful adoption. Because nobody, including the adopters, wants to bring an animal back that it didn't work out. We really want to help them find the best suited home possible. One of the other things that I do is I pretty much have, it's a small house. I've got a really small house, but I do have this large crate that I set up for the fosters. And I do put this pen that's around it. It's not really an X pen. It's actually designed for to protect children from fireplaces. But I really like it because it's heavy for one, and the animals can't knock it over, and it has the metal vertical bars on it. So it's really unlikely that they could climb out of it. Regular X pens just don't work. They can knock them over, they can go, some of them can go under, they can climb out of them. This really seems to work for me. And the last bit of enrichment that I like to do, and this actually is for the fosters that I have for longer periods of time, and Nancy will like this.
I remember Katie.
She was wonderful.
What a great
I had Katie for, oh God, probably 5 months.
Yeah, she was there a while.
And, she ended up having to have a leg amputated, and while she was with us, we did nose work. And she was just a happy, happy girl, and she found a wonderful home as well. She was one dog that actually came really close to being a foster parent. It's always the ones that you put extra time and care in and that stay for a while that we have a hard time letting go.
The longer they stay, the harder it is.
It really is. So the next, oh, excuse me. The next group of animals that need to be fostered are for medical needs. So primarily animals that are recovering from surgery or illness. And this was my very first medical foster. And again, I just happened to have been at the shelter. I was standing there and they brought this little 6-week-old puppy, and someone had found her on their lawn in the middle of the night. It was raining and she had electrical burns inside her sinus cavity, so she could hardly breathe. She had a cleft palate. And as they were examining her, they realized that she had had some head trauma. She was blind in one eye and she had a funky deformed front leg, kind of like a flipper. You can kind of see it in the middle picture. So I brought her home and I loved her and cared for her, and she grew and she thrived. And when she got a little bit older and her wounds had pretty much healed, they realized that that flipper leg wasn't doing her any service. So they amputated it, and she stayed with us through the healing of her surgery, and we found her a fabulous home. Now, the thing I wanted to mention about finding these animals home is that most of the puppies that come in, and you only have them for, a week or two, they typically go back to the shelter and they will stay at the shelter in the pet adoption center to be adopted. But a lot of these special cases, whether it's a behavioral need or a medical need, usually will stay with the foster parent so that we can meet potential adopters, explain how, what the needs are of that particular animal, and guide them and see, try and find the best match for them. So I feel really lucky in that capacity, so that I know when it's a good match, and I know that they're going to be loved and cared for, and it does make it a little bit easier to say goodbye, knowing that they're going to have a good life. This was Rosie. She came in with some skin issues for a while, I guess because I had raised Chloe with that horrible Demodex. I got a lot of the skin cases. So Rosie came in, and while she was here healing from her Demodex, she actually tore a cruciate. So she ended up having ACL surgery. So she was here for quite a while until she got adopted. Then this little guy came in with 4, I believe, litter mates that they found them locked in someone's bathroom, an abandoned house in the bathroom. And this is Chumba. Sorry, she's wreaking havoc. And say hi, everybody. And so we named him Dobby because of his funky ears, and he stayed with me for a little over a month and gained weight and healed, and he's doing great. Here's Katie. So Katie, like I said, she had come in with an injured leg, and they tried to save the leg, but it was causing her more pain. And as she grew, it just wasn't going to work for her. So they ended up doing an amputation. And this little guy we had last year, he came in, 3 months old, and he had a fractured elbow. And they did surgery to put in, you can see in the middle picture, they put in a metal plate to hold his elbow in place. And he stayed with us. He needed quite a bit, as did Katie, quite a bit of PT work. So we had exercises to do a couple times a day and restricted activity. So lots of just leash walks, and until they healed. And this little guy was with us this past spring. Gravy came actually up from the south. He had quite a few medical issues. He was blind. He had some facial deformities, as you can see. And his biggest issue was that he had a very low heart rate. So he had some cardiac issues, but he was amazingly sweet and loving. And the shelter workers down in Alabama felt that his best chance would be to send him up here to see if they can do anything for him. And the shelter actually found a donor that sponsored his surgery, and they did put in a pacemaker for him to correct his cardiac issues. Unfortunately, though, a few weeks after surgery, which actually went really well and he bounced back from, he did pass away. There were some underlying medical issues, and that was completely undiscovered. So we lost him. And that's a big downside of fostering. I haven't lost many of the fosters that come through my house, but it does happen, especially the bottle babies, the neonatals. They're very fragile when they're that little, and anything can happen. So we, say our prayers and, take it day by day, and love them for as much as we have them. So behavior issues are placed into foster care. Those that come in that are shy, and I just don't mean a little bit shy. We're talking animals that completely shut down in the shelter environment. They're under socialized. They've come from hoarding situations, and just are afraid of the world. There's also animals that just can't handle the stress of shelter life well. They try and find foster homes for them as well. And then we have animals that require some type of behavior modification. And just tapping into the feline world, there are some cats that won't use a litter box when they're in the shelter, so they put them in a foster home to see how they are in a house. So some of the animals that have come through here, these two, there was Ruby on the left and Goose in the middle on the right. They were both pretty severe resource guarders in the shelter. So, trying to take a food bowl, trying to take a bone away or a toy, or, try and get them off of a couch. Yeah, they're, happy, smiling, cute little dogs here, but they, the devil came out in them. So I didn't have them at the same time, but, I worked with them, and we got to the point where it was manageable. And once again, this isn't something we're talking about they're completely cured, but it's getting the information so that we can find an appropriate home for them, and giving their adopters ways to manage the behavior and what to look out for. Goose was another one that almost stayed. We really liked him a lot. He was here for about 4 months. These two little guys, this little puggle is Max, and he was a biter. Not severe enough where he was really attacking people, but he'd be walking down the street, and and he'd bite somebody who was walking by him, and so he really couldn't stay in the shelter, where at the time they would have members of the public coming in much more than they do now under COVID restrictions. And so he stayed with us. We worked with him a little bit. He also didn't really like to be handled. So touching his ears, his paws, putting a harness on was really difficult. So we worked with him on some of those behaviors. And then Lucky on the right was 5-year-old Jack Russell Terrier in every sense of the word Jack Russell Terrier. So think of one that that's crazy for the ball and a little OCD and just barky, jumpy, spins. That was Lucky, and I had a blast with him, and that's when I actually kind of fell in love with Jack Russells. And yeah, he stayed here for a while, and we found a perfect home for him that was used to the breed and just absolutely loved it. And they had a 10-year-old boy who just loved throwing the ball, and it was a match. These guys on the left came from a hoarding situation. This is, I was talking about, just afraid of the world. There were about 60 dogs that came out, and most of them were just housed outside in pens with no contact with people, not clean. They were matted, they were filthy. Actually, these pictures that are on the left, they had already had a bath, but the mats were just awful, and they needed to be pretty much shaved down and start from scratch. So they stayed with us, and again, just giving them the time and space that they need, their confidence built, and we found perfect homes for them as well. And these were my shy girls. So that came in this year. This was when I first brought them home. They were in the crate. They would not look at me at all. I'd put the food down and I'd have to walk away. They wouldn't eat in my presence. Usually with my fosters, I feed them in their crate, and for a couple of reasons. One is so that they can be separated from the other animals in the house, but also because we try to get the dogs used to being in a crate and crate trained. We don't know what homes they'll be adopted to. And it's just something that they should be accustomed to. And, they go to their adopter's home. If they want them sleeping on the bed, have at it, but they will have this skill and this comfort in a crate that they can go with. They have that option then. But these girls, they just wouldn't look at me. It took them almost a week before they would actually come out of the crate with me in the room. And this was, you can tell one is braver than the other. And it's kind of funny. They're actually named after the vampires from the whole Twilight series. So we have Rosalie, Alice, and there was a third sister, Bella, who was in a different foster home. She got adopted, but it didn't work out. So they sent me Bella too. I just have to share this because I absolutely love this. You can see how Alice is playing in a crate, and you can see Rosalie is on the side of her. She was definitely the more timid of the puppies. But you notice how she looks over and she can see, oh, wow, she's looking at us, and she nudges her sister. And then Alice stops and looks, and they both look at me and like, that was it. They stopped playing until I actually left. And I just got a kick out of that. And it took them 2 weeks for them to actually come out of the house. I would bring my dogs out and I would just leave the back door open. And eventually they ventured out, and on their own time, they built up their confidence enough to come down the steps. And once they started coming out, there was no stopping them. That was really their biggest threshold, literally and figuratively. They came out, they started running and playing. And again, not that they were cured, but their confidence definitely started building. And then Rosalie had gotten adopted first. And when she left, then Bella came, and Bella and Alice were here for a while together until they both went to their homes. And the neatest thing about this was that the three sisters, actually, their adopters all know each other. And Alice and Bella's dads are brothers.
Oh,
So
cool.
all three puppies actually get together now for play dates, and they're being raised together. Not in the same house, but they get to see each other often, which is really heartwarming. I love that. The last type of fostering is something that's fairly new to the shelter anyway, is for respite care. And this is the shortest term fostering. It's for animals that have been in the shelter for a while, and they try to find foster homes that will take them for a weekend, even if it's just for an overnight visit. These dogs have been in the shelter system for months, and it's just nice to give them a break from being in the shelter, and also to gather information about how they are in a home. And, if you take them down to the park and you go for a walk, how are they out on a leash? How are they, traveling in a car? And the more information they have, the better off, it is in finding them homes. So these guys actually are currently at the shelter, and they do go out for brief weekend fostering. This is Juju. She's the longest term resident dog on the left, and she's been there since July. And Gus, who's in the middle, and Minnie on the right, have both been there since August. So if you decide to foster, like, what do you need, and what should you prepare for? The basic supplies are all provided by the rescue or shelter, no matter what group I've worked with. They all provide food, all the medical supplies, collar, harness, leash. If you need a crate, if you need bedding, pee pads for the puppies, pretty much anything. And if they don't have it, they will either get it or they request for it to be donated. The one thing you do have to consider is the space in your house. So allocating a space either for a crate, an X pen, if you need to separate your own animals, baby gates to separate off the areas, just something again to think about initially. And the one thing, people say, oh, I don't have a fenced in yard, I couldn't foster. And that is not a requirement by any means to be a foster. The puppies that have not been vaccinated or have just recently been vaccinated cannot leave your house for, health reasons. We don't want them picking up any type of diseases. And so they do need to stay home. So if you can set up a safe place for them to play, that would be great. But you can put them on a long line if you want to take them outside to play, or just take them for, walks in safe areas. But it's not a necessity to have a fenced yard. It's nice, but it's not necessary. And the other thing is time commitment. Caring for a foster animal is going to take additional time out of your day. There's no way around that. It just is. Whether you have to, you've got puppies and you have to clean up pee and poop and make sure everybody gets fed. And, if it's a medical foster, making sure that they get their medication or doing their PT exercises, it's definitely a commitment as of your time, but it's just so worth it. And then the biggest thing is just a lot of patience and a lot of love. And, you get that all in return,
And
100-fold, 1,000-fold, millionfold. And then at the end, the other question, I started off with, people say that they couldn't do it because they'd want to keep them all. And is it difficult to give them up? Yeah, it really is. Some more than others. I'm not gonna, say some of them. When you've got a litter of, 6 kittens and they're climbing the walls, literally, it's like, okay, go, fine, you need your own homes, but there are some that definitely are difficult to give up. But when you know that they're going to a good home, and you have the opportunity to meet their new families, it definitely makes it worthwhile and extremely rewarding. So that's all I got to say, folks.
so one of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is this, because I have fostered Akitas, and I've had, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 fosters. And yes, I have the double F for foster failure plastered on my forehead. You said something about the puppies that were afraid of leaving their crate. One of the girls that I adopted came out of sort of, I won't say the shelter because even though this was a long time ago, I don't want to rat this person out. This girl who I ended up calling Nika, and the dog that she was living with were left behind, tied to trees while their house burned to the ground, basically right beside them. And they were taken to the shelter. The one dog was a purebred and went into a rescue for that breed. And I went to temperament test Nika, and she passed with flying colors. So I brought her home, thinking that I was just going to foster her. And she was so traumatized. And I don't know, in retrospect, I don't know how she passed that temperament test, because she was fine in the shelter, because I guess it's because she was with other dogs and she felt sort of anonymous. When I got her home, anytime a human walked into the room, she would slam up against the wall and try and sort of hide behind furniture. And it took her a full month before she would let anyone in the family approach her or would walk up to us. And I was really adamant that she did it all on her own time. Rocky.
Yeah.
She did all on her. Made the choice. No one tried to coax her. It wasn't.
That's
"Come on,
all you
puppy,
can, that's
puppy,
the
puppy,
best that
puppy."
you can do for them.
Yeah, yeah. And by doing that, it took us 2 years, but she did, after 2 years, she liked humans again. It took her a full year before she would approach a human, and then 2 years before she would approach a human with confidence. She
Mhm.
was a great dog. She was really a great dog. She actually ended up being the ring bearer for 2 of my patients.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, they got married. It was really sweet.
That's sweet.
I see that Dory has her hand up. Dory, you want to add something?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Lisa, for this presentation, and Nancy for hosting, and GBKC for hosting also. Lisa, I found your presentation very interesting. And as you were talking, I found myself nodding my head because my partner and I spent 10 years involved with Roddy Rescue. And we had 2 bitches at the time, and my breed is not the best with same sex. And our 2 girls had a relationship that we did not want to disturb by bringing a fostering females. So for our tenure in Roddy Rescue, we fostered males, and they were primarily adult males because our work schedule did not accommodate raising puppies.
Right.
And one thing that I found very beneficial now this was a private rescue group. This was not affiliated through any type of shelter. I processed applications to adopt. I like to do that, which meant the initial phone interview, which lasted, in my case, at least an hour, sometimes 2 hours.
Right.
I wanted to get to know the person. Then there was the home check. There was also a vet check, and talking to 2 references. The home check, where you go to the applicant's home and talk to them and meet them in person and any other animals they have. That was the last part of the application process. And the reason I like to do that is, especially if the person was interested in my foster. That dog was spending time in my house. I knew that dog pretty much inside and out because rescue was not keen on letting a dog be put up for adoption until it had spent at least 2 weeks in a foster home. So by the time I had the male foster in my house and he went up on the site, you wrote the bio, you supplied the pictures because you as a foster knew that dog the best.
Right.
I wanted to be sure that the person who was applying to adopt my dog was up to snuff.
Right.
And one of the benefits that this process entailed was I became friends with many of the adopters of our foster boys. And in fact, I am still in touch with two people, and I hear from a third occasionally, and we haven't been involved in rescue and fostering for a good many years now.
Right.
I too found it very rewarding to give a good dog who had passed its temperament test, to give that dog another chance at life, at a good life.
Yeah.
When through no fault of its own, it got dealt a bad hand initially. So there are a great many benefits to fostering, and it would be a very good thing for more people to consider doing that. I read an article in the Ithaca Journal about a week ago that shelters are rethinking euthanasia policy because there's now an uptick in animals being surrendered because of inflation. People are having a hard time feeding themselves and taking care of themselves. And what goes? The animal.
Yeah.
And one final point, we have a Dixie dog in our house too. He was surrendered at about almost 2 years old to the Shelby, Alabama shelter. And he was neutered and sent up to the Greater Humane Society in Nashua. So a Northern family would adopt him. And we have had him. Jib is now 15 years old. All the dogs in our house have a job to do. And I think that is important for certain breeds of dogs, working breeds. They need a job, because if you don't give them a job, sometimes they're going to think of a job for them. Yes. Oftentimes you don't want them to do the job that they assign themselves. And Jib's job is to amuse and entertain us. Taika, my Rottie, she's the performance dog. So that's my response and take on your presentation, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
There's Caitlin, has her hand up.
Caitlin, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hello. So I have fostered 4 dogs at this point. I have just one resident dog. I've been pretty lucky as far as behavioral things, but I always kind of struggle with the balance of not wanting to stress out my resident dog if at some that have had like resource guarding things. So I was wondering if you had insight on how you like to balance that if you ever decide that a foster is not appropriate for your home because it's too much on your resident dogs and kind of that.
Yeah, I can see how that can happen easily. Like I said, I usually take it really slow in the beginning to keep them separated. And I always keep them separated when I eat. I always keep them separated when I leave the house. They're never left together unsupervised. And so that's the one thing. I have more of an issue with dogs that come in that are cat chasers. And not just the puppies want to play with the cats, and I get that, but adult dogs that are more aggressive towards the cats. And I actually, depending on the group that I'm fostering for, I will go back and talk to them and see if we can find a more appropriate foster home for that animal. But for me, in order to manage it, sometimes I've been forced to do like a crate and rotate kind of thing. I've had to actually, lock the cats up in a bedroom when I have the foster out, or with my dogs, I'll put Ellie in the back room for a while. The fosters, unless it's the most fearful, and I mean fearful at night, puppy who's crying a lot, they will go in a crate in my bedroom, but otherwise they just don't come into the bedroom at night. That's my dog's space, and that's their time to be with me. So I do try to separate that with them. I don't know if any of that's helpful, but
Thank you very much.
sure.
Did I see someone else wanting to ask a question? Gone. Lisa, really, thank you so much for your time and your energy.
You're
I
welcome.
really appreciate this, and I'm hoping that more people will step up and foster. I know when my beloved old girl, I'm looking at her now, I may bring in an older female just for hospice. Hospice is an easy way to foster. I mean, it's hard when they move to heaven, but
Yeah.
there's a great need for hospice. I've done most of the dogs I've taken in have been older, or dogs that were not easily placed because they were middle-aged or there was something going on with them. And I've been very glad that I've done it. Very glad that I've done it.
Oh, it's definitely needed. I haven't actually had that opportunity to do, we call them fospice, because, you're fostering.
Right.
Yeah. But we have had some dogs, well, some cats as well, that, just go into foster care and to live out the rest of their senior days.
Yeah, most of the senior dogs that have moved in with me, I've been told, 3 or 4 months, and then 2 years later. Yeah, because I love it here. 3 squares a day, plenty of great beds.
Sure.
Fun dogs to play with.
Who's going anywhere?
All right. Super. All right, then. Thanks so much again for your time, and I'm glad that everybody tuned in.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to share our lives.
Yeah, great info, Lisa. Thanks so much.
Sure, you're welcome.